Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have a look at the latest from the live radar, run through the UKV, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days, as we have got a fairly warm week coming up with temperatures widely into the low to mid-20s, and that is looking likely to last all the way until Thursday or Friday. Unfortunately though, there will be some areas of rain, especially in the north and west like we are seeing today. As we head towards the end of the week, we can actually see some really quite hot upper air temperatures move in. It won't impact the surface temperatures all too much, as it is fairly transient change in air mass, but it will do is perhaps pep up the rain and maybe even ignite some big thunderstorms as we head towards Thursday or Friday. Again, still a number of days away, so still is a little bit of uncertainty with the positioning and timings, but it is looking like a fairly decent summery week. However, as we head into the longer range, into the weekend and into next week, as we veer towards the end of August and start of September, it is looking likely that we could see autumn arriving quite abruptly with some very strong westerly winds, with the jet stream really starting to power up with lots of low pressure moving in. Now, it doesn't mean there won't be warmer and drier periods, it just means that it's going to be turning more changeable, like what we have seen through a lot of summer. But of course the upper air temperatures will be starting to fall and the surface temperatures will start to fall as those daylight hours do shrink, and generally upper air temperatures do make the slow decline as we do spread and head towards winter. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the links in the description. So to start on the live radar, you can see for most of England and Wales it's a fairly dry day. A few showers breaking out in the north and northwest of England, and some showers breaking out across parts of Wales. Most of these again quite light and fairly scattered. Some more persistent rain moving into parts of western Scotland here, as we do have low pressure nearby to the south of Greenland. This is going to sort of sit there for most of the week, for eventually moving in towards the end of the week, spreading in cooler conditions, and that way we could see the clash of hot air coming up from the south with that low pressure, again potentially triggering some thunderstorms in the latter part of the week. But this will unfortunately mean in the north and the west we could keep quite a few showers through this week, but to the south it will be a fairly summery week, so quite a big contrast, and hopefully things do break up here. But at the moment some heavy rain, moderate rain moving in for northern and western areas. If you look at the temperatures just before 2 p.m, you can see it's another fairly warm day, especially in the south and the east. Temperatures here widely in the low 20s and peaking around the mid 20s, 25 or 26 degrees. And this even spreading up towards eastern Scotland, where it's drier as well, getting into the low 20s here. As I said, it's widely fairly warm and fairly dry. But you can see to our south, across central parts of France, towards southern France, we're into the mid to high 30s, maybe even touching 40 degrees in a few spots. So quite a big heat wave developing across southern Europe here, towards Spain, France and Italy. Again, nothing ridiculous, but still really quite hot. And this is the air mass that will try to spread towards us towards the latter part of the week, perhaps influencing us in the upper air levels, but at the surface is remaining tantalisingly close for much of the week, towards Paris. Southwards is getting into the 30s here. So you can see it's very hot close by, but for most of the week we're going to be in sort of average to above average temperatures. If you do look at the UKV now, you'll be able to see that over the coming days. You can see the rain spreading into the north and the west through the rest of this afternoon. And through this afternoon and evening, it will slowly move eastwards but lose its intensity as it spreads further inland, turning more patchy through the overnight hours. Into tomorrow, much of that rain that we are seeing overnight does dissipate, leaving some remnants of cloud and a few showers, but actually a more widespread, drier day tomorrow. And of course, plenty of sunshine around those few showers, especially in southern areas. As we head into Wednesday, you could see some more rain in the north and west. As I said, always the risk for that over this upcoming week, as we've got low pressure out to our north and our west. Could be more persistent across parts of the Republic of Ireland and again western Scotland. But as we head through Wednesday evening, that rain will move further inland into Thursday. This is where the risk of heavy showers and storms starts. You can see to the south, we do see some heavy thundery showers spreading in. They don't make too many inroads inland through the overnight hours into the morning. But when we do see a more persistent band of heavy rain with perhaps some thunderstorms on its southern edge through much of the Midlands and northern England through Thursday evening, and this is when the very hot air mass is trying to waft up from the south. Into Friday, we see similar conditions with more heavy thundery rain breaking out on Friday for eventually clearing, and we do slowly spread into cooler and more unsettled air in from the west. Now it's better to see this on the upper air temperatures. You see through much this week we're sort of average to slightly above average upper air temperatures, and as we head into Wednesday afternoon, you can see temperatures perhaps starting to get into the mid to high teens in some spots, even getting towards 19 or 20 degrees to the south of England into the English Channel, and that spreads just about inland through Thursday evening into Friday, and that is what gives that boundary in the north. We see that very heavy around, what gives that fuel and gives the risk of some thunderstorms in that location. And then finally through Friday afternoon into Saturday, eventually it all gets spread away. But quite a confusing picture there towards the end of the week, those exact air masses, and with that rain and those thunderstorms. By looking at this air mass, you'd expect temperatures in the southeast get into 30s. But we're not going to be seeing that because, or at least from this UKV run, because of the cloud, rain and thunderstorm risk. Now, if you put on the max temperatures, you can see today 24 to 26 degrees in many central and east areas, and into tomorrow we're seeing very similar conditions again, widely 24 to 26 in southern and east areas, but even 20 degrees could get as north as eastern Scotland. Into Wednesday, very similar conditions once again, widely into the low to mid 20s in the south, and to Thursday a bit more uncertainty, more cooler air, or cooler temperatures there across parts of southern Republic of Ireland, North Wales, into northern England. That's where the band of rain is starting to move in. But to the south, that's still 24 or 25. Now to Friday, we should have that really hot air mass just lingering in the southeast, but we're not really seeing much change in temperatures, still 24 or 25, but the difference is further northwards, looking more at mid-teens quite widely as cooler air does move in. So you can see very warm through most of this week and will remain warm all the way to Friday afternoon for southern and eastern areas. But by Thursday, we see an increased risk of more widespread rain and some thunderstorms. We could see some very big contrast in air masses clashing through the end of the working week. And we're still quite uncertain exactly how that will play out. Another day or two of shorter range runs, and we'll probably be able to have a much better look at this. But if you have got plans for Thursday and Friday, could be pretty volatile at the moment, the models. Could be some heavy rain around, could be some thunderstorms, but equally it could be very warm, all depending on the timings of the changes in air mass and of course the positioning of that divide. On that divide there will be quite a lot of rain from the looks of this. Now, if you go over and have a look at the longer range now, we have to see how looking pretty autumnal in the longer term. Now, you can see that low pressure out to our north and our west, sort of milling away, not really doing much till the end of the week. High pressure, or a weaker area of high pressure, is in the south, and it is an extension of the high pressure over Europe, which is producing some very hot conditions. Eventually that low pressure moves in through Thursday, and on the boundary with the hotter air to our south, it does produce heavy rain and thunderstorms. Beyond that, though, into the longer term, through the weekend, starting next week, you can see the winds coming from the northwesterly. Again, we don't look remarkably unsettled here. No huge low pressure systems over us yet, but the air mass coming from the northwest will mean it's more likely average to below average. Into the longer term, you can see, as we saw in yesterday's video, some ex-tropical systems potentially starting to hit the jet stream, and that could really spice things up and amplify the jet. And on here, it simply just moves the jet straight towards us, giving us unsettled conditions. And into the extended range, we actually see a high pressure system built in, and you'd think here we're going into a very warm and dry early September, but look out to the west, an ex-tropical system with all its energy has the ability to shove that high pressure eastwards as it makes a dive towards Iceland, still keeping us under relative high pressure, but breaking that high pressure apart a little bit. In that longer term, you can see colder air starting to build to our north. Again, if we look at the air mass clashes through this week, you can see very hot air just to our south, a 25 degree isotherm is just across central France, but it's not going to get close to the UK, with us maybe just about getting into the 15, maybe skimming the 20-degree isotherm latter part of this week, for eventually getting swept away by the low pressure system. If you look at the GM, again, that low pressure milling out to our north and our west, see the high pressure out to our south and our east. Eventually the low pressure moves through latter part of this week, perhaps becoming a little bit of a cut-off low for a couple of days there, for eventually we see more of a westerly flow develop. And just look at that, low pressure systems are lining up in the Atlantic, some transient high pressure systems, but generally not looking good. Again, the temperature deviations here aren't horrible out in the North Atlantic, because a lot of the energy getting pushed into these lows is from extratropical systems. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's definitely going to be cold, but it could be really unsettled. And if the jet does shift to a more northwesterly, which this GM doesn't show, but is possible with this sort of pattern, then it would turn cooler. As you can see, quite a big cold pool is beginning to form over Greenland as we are beginning the slow descent into winter, and the stratospheric polar vortex, i.e. the very intense core of cold air above the Arctic, is just about starting to reform throughout the atmosphere as we do, as I said, head on that descent into winter. If you finally have a look at the ECMWF, again, low pressure out to our north and our west, high pressure to the south and the east. Low pressure eventually moves through. There's a bit of a cut-off low by the end of the week. And then eventually, into the longer term, we do go into quite a west and northwesterly pattern. And all the way to day 10, it is looking very unsettled. Again, it doesn't look like a centre of the lows close by, but most of the country is under lower pressure. Jet stream heading straight towards us. The upper air temperatures aren't particularly great, but the big thing with the upper air temperatures, you can see cold air is feeding into the backside of these low pressure systems from Greenland and northern Canada. Warm air is coming up from the central Atlantic, and it's just going to fuel these low pressure systems. You can see that from the temperature deviation. Cold air coming in, warm air coming up from the south. And you look at those 300 HPA, and you can see westerly flow, complete northwesterly, heading into the UK, and it's going to keep us fairly unsettled and potentially cool as well as we head into the longer term. And you see this on the accumulated precipitation, huge amounts of rainfall in the North Atlantic, heading towards the UK. Of course, more bullseye areas in the north and the west, but we would be seeing widespread rain with this sort of pattern. And finally, if we look at the ensembles, latest GFS ensembles, you can see it's quite warm over the next few days, above average, and potentially even spiking 10 plus degrees above average by the end of this working week, but really only for about 24 hours or so. And then we see a big descent into the weekend to below average, and it kind of remains around that 5-degree isotherm point, which it doesn't move, but becomes more inclined with average as we head through into early September, as the 1981-2020 mean does drop. So yeah, generally seeing a bit of a step change here back towards cooler conditions, but not remarkably cold, and increased in precipitation as well. Still uncertainty, especially in the south, because we are closer to high pressure and furthest from the low pressure to our north and west, so we're more on the periphery of very unsettled weather, but regardless, definitely a pickup in more unsettled and cooler conditions. You can see the step change in the temperatures as well, widely 25 degrees for the next 4 or 5 days, and then step down to around the high teens, maybe touching 20 degrees as we do head into early September. If you look at the ECMWF, again, very similar, upper temperature spiking by the end of this week, and then dropping off to around average or below average for the foreseeable future. A few warmer runs appearing in the long term, just about creeping the average above. It's early September, but really nothing to take note of, but generally quite a lot of precipitation and fairly cool conditions. And again, if we compare this to Glasgow, for example, further northwards, you can see generally average conditions for the foreseeable future and lots of unsettled conditions. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be cold with a westerly flow. There is the risk of that, the risk of cooler conditions, but at the moment it's looking generally pretty much average. It's the big thing is going to be the surface temperatures will cloud and rain around, probably will be pretty poor if we see this pattern, and of course precipitation in general is going to be very high, as you can see from the precipitation charts here from the ECMWF. So the next 3 to 5 days quite widely look pretty decent. Looks fairly warm and fairly dry, especially in the south and the east. Could see some quite volatile conditions through Thursday, Friday. Again, we need to pinpoint that near at the time. But as we head beyond that, it is looking likely to turn a lot more unsettled, and it is looking likely we're going to see some sort of early autumnal pattern as we do end August and start September. Hopefully things can change. We see some proper summery conditions in September, but at the moment we're seeing a bit of a warmer, drier spell now. But again, it's not completely dry, and then we'll head back into the westerlies by the end of the weekend into start of next week. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.